Well, obviously some milk crates with the podium instead of taller. But that's okay, it's something we can deal with. So, thank you for the warm reception here. It is quite an honor and a privilege to have this opportunity to talk to all of you on this day of remembrance of Veterans Day. There's been a lot in the news lately about numerology, and numerology being that mystic study of numbers and how it impacts your life, hopefully in a positive way. So I was watching the news last night, and I watched this piece on Channel 11 about things that are going to be happening, different events, parties, festivities that will be happening because it's 11/11/11. For me, honestly, it's another day. It's a great day because I'm here versus where I was. But we'll get to that. But for me, on this day, 11/11/11, back in my studies, back in my, I guess what we call high school studies, I remember that to be a day that was dedicated as Armistice Day. And it was the declaration of the end of World War I on the 11th hour, the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, which brought a close to, in really closed down a piece of history for the world where multi-nations ended up going to war over resources, over political matters, and after a great number of folks had to die to figure out that, I think we'll just go ahead and call index to this because nobody's really getting an advantage. So to me, the numerology of 11/11/11 was presented that way as Armistice Day, and of course in the 80s turned over, maybe even earlier, but my only recollection is the 80s going from Armistice Day to Veterans Day. A day where we get to set aside a little bit of a special presence and take a look at what does that mean to us. And so today, I've been asked to come to speak on Veterans Day and share my experience as I served overseas for 20 months, 2 consecutive tours of duty with 2 different organizations, 2 different mindsets, 2 different mantras, several sets of missions. And really, what does that mean when you look at it in terms of what a veteran brings back for that educational, that learning piece? And especially at this college that is based on and has really become a forefront and a front runner in the nation when it comes to getting that and allowing for experiential learning to count for accreditation and credit toward a trade, a vocation, even if it was something that started as an avocation, a hobby. So, again, I guess my journey to this podium starts back in 2003 for me, when I enlisted. But I'm going to take a step back further. That step back is that moment that I had decided to take off the clothes that you guys are wearing and to try these on. So, I'd gone to college in 1993 to 98 to the University of Minnesota Duluth. I had very arrogantly decided to go ahead and choose a double major of chemistry and applied math. I thought those would be 2 different things that changed the world. And during my course at UMD, I made some choices. And the resultant of those choices meant that in 1998, I chose to drop out with barely a 2.0, so I didn't have to go on academic probation. I was about $15,000 in the hole, most of that given up to the local watering holes in the Fine City of Duluth. I'd like to help that boost. And I'd like to think I helped boost the economy there for a while, at least in the early 90s. And without finishing that education, I really didn't have a way to say that I was accredited. I didn't have a job. And so I ended up subsequently moving back home to Mom and Dad, literally living in the basement. And it gets better. It really does. Okay, with a pregnant wife, in a Midwestern family who loves meat and potatoes, and swear to God, she got sick every time my mom made steak. It was like part of her morning sickness, this trigger. So really, I was caught in my own personal veritable Hades, for lack of a better term. And so I looked at it, and I found some jobs, got myself back up, scooped myself back up, said, okay, you know what, I'm done with those choices of, looking toward the bottle for answers. I guess nothing came out of that. And I ended up working my way up from construction laborer to a foreman to eventually a public works director for a small town where I was able to get a water license and a sewer license and actually be productive. And then 9/11 happened, and over the last 10 years, there's been a lot of chronological history about that point in time. And what happened with me, the impact of 9/11 for me was they cut the budget, they cut my position, and I was back out looking for a job again. So I found one. I found one as a quantitative research analysis for Part 3, which is a subsidiary of 3M. It was in pharmaceuticals, so my job was to kind of be a lab rat, conduct chemistry tests on known drugs, and verify for the FDA that they were the drugs that you were getting. So 200 milligrams of acetaminophen or Tylenol was 200 milligrams of acetaminophen and Tylenol, plus or minus a little. But that's the FDA. So don't worry, I validated a lot of them. You guys should be good to go. Should be. Within reason, like I said, plus or minus. So I was doing this job, and all of a sudden it turns around. It's 2003, and I'm looking up at the big screen that we had in our lab. Actually, it wasn't really a big screen. It was an enhanced duct tape 27-inch CRT cathode ray tube TV, much like that on the wall, hanging over yonder. And I'm watching on the news as they report another 14 soldiers have died to IED attacks over in Iraq. Now, honestly, up to this point, when I was in 10th grade in 1990, I think that's when Desert Storm was, we watched the videotapes, and my history teacher, who was a Korean War vet, the poor man barely made it through history class. Each time he turned on the TV, he almost had a heart attack. It was televised war. It was televised history. You couldn't get any better curriculum writing than that. And I didn't pay much attention to it. Not when I was 15. It didn't really seem to matter. But all of a sudden in 2003, as I'm standing there in the lab, surrounded by some of the best and brightest chemists, physicists, mathematicians, grant writers. I mean, you've had a phenomenal number of people doing extremely just groundbreaking research on things that we use now, like the estradiol birth control patch. They were actually researching that back then when I was there. They were researching the new nicotine patches and transdermals. They were looking at new fast-acting inhalers for those to treat not only adult onset, but childhood asthma. So really good things, at least in theory. But as you talk to these people, it struck me as completely astounding that none of them could hold a conversation. These people were the best and brightest in their field. They had specialized to the point where they had more PhDs in there, and they probably couldn't put a Band-Aid on something, and you could shake a stick at. And these are the same people, swear as I stand here in front of you, would tie their Velcro shoes in knots and trip over them and wonder why that happened. The physicist would be able to tell you how fast you fell to the ground, and if it was an elastic or inelastic reaction, as you hit and thud. If you knock something over in the lab, the chemist would tell you if you're going to probably burn to death, or what kind of chemical burn that was. And the mathematician would calculate your comp. But they're still going to hold a conversation. And I'm coming from a blue-collar background, being in construction, where I learned how to drive heavy equipment, where I learned how to work a shovel, being on the proper side, the north end, being on the south end, digging east. I learned all these things. I had learned a different nomenclature, a different language, how to get along with others out in the field, because sometimes things happen. Your backhoe falls in the hole, and you get buried, and you have a team above you that you're really hoping unburies you. So it was a different world, and I looked at it, and I looked at myself, and I thought, you know what? if I look back at my history, I've been really, really lucky. I was a product of the Vietnam War. I was born in South Vietnam. In 1974, I was flown out of Vietnam 2 weeks before the fall of Saigon on the American baby lift that got the orphans out. So I got to be that product of that war. And I got transplanted here in Minnesota. My father's German, my mother's Polish. I look just like them, except I tan better. And they're quite jealous. I had been able to go to high school. I've been able to have a post-secondary education. I had all these opportunities, and a lot of which I squandered by the simple fact that I made choices, and not always educated ones, because I didn't necessarily understand the difference between theoretical and experiential learning, and how the theory became practical. And it wasn't until that point in 2003 that I realized I can't be here because I need to do something different. I need to be able to tell my son and daughter that for the last 30 years, Dad did something. Because at that point in time, my only choice was, well, you know what your dad did for a living? He made drugs. That wasn't necessarily the moniker that I wanted to carry forward, because I didn't see a value system in it. I made drugs for a blind and validated them for blind mass that I would never see, but that my work would impact. And based on two things: my laboratory procedure, now I'm human, so I might be a mistake, and then my signature to validate my own laboratory procedure, which is good for 10 years. Which means that within those 10 years, from the time that I quit and the time they archive my notebooks, I can be recalled back to the courthouse to testify on whether I had validated those drugs properly or not. And I got paid $17.50 an hour for my time. Which, if you look at it, $28 an hour, I think equates to $40,000 a year. So not necessarily the best wage, but a wage nonetheless. So I thought, all right, you know what, here's the deal. I'm going to go there, I'm going to join the Army, because I still have 2 good legs, I still have 2 good arms, and it's about time that I actually did something worthwhile to give back to a country that I have claimed citizenship for. That citizenship was claimed in 1977. I was 2 years old. My mother swore me in. I still have the little green suit. I still have my American flag. It's in my youth collection. And now I'm in a green suit again. And yes, I still own a U.S. flag. It's in my bedroom, folded up in a trunk. And so I decided at that point in time to go ahead and join the service. So what I did was I told my boss, you have 24 hours to give me my paycheck. I'm going down to the recruiting office and go join the Army, and that is exactly what happened. In 24 hours, I turned myself from being a lab rat to sitting at the map station, waiting for processing, so that I could attempt to have the opportunity to do something worthwhile. So that's part of the story of how I got here. The next part is a little bit more cumbersome to talk about. And that is because after my experiences overseas, some of them were pleasant, some of them were darn right funny. You have those. Some of them were not. Some of them